Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you're well. It's Rabbi Akiva Males, and we are um, trying our best to record this. I'm sorry about the minor. I'm just trying to mute this, and then we'll do this. Okay, I'm sorry about the connection issues. All right, so let's get started. So we're getting ready for Parshas Vayakhel and Pekudei. So I want to share with you some sources today on both Vayakhel and Pekudei, and hopefully this will enrich your understanding of the parsha. So Vayakhel and Pekudei, these are the final two parshios in Sefer Shemos, the second book of the Torah, and they deal with the building of the Mishkan, the tabernacle that was built in the wilderness. That was the traveling temple for the wilderness. And in these two last parshios, it's a review again of everything that was necessary for the construction, all the items that were donated, as well as what was built. We're going to start off by seeing a source on page 1. The pasuk says right towards the beginning of the parsha, "Kichu meitchem truma la Hashem." So God had told Moshe that when he was collecting goods to build the Mishkan, I want you to take for yourself an offering for the Lord. And he says, "Kol nediv libo yeviena." As trumas Hashem zahav v'kesef and achoshes, so that every generous-hearted person shall bring it, and it should be for God gold, silver, and there's also going to be nechoshes. There's going to be copper as well. So we're going to see now one of our sources. Again, I'm sorry, I'm having some technical issues, so I'll use a hard read. The first source we've got here. This is from Sefer Torah Ladas, Rabbi Matis Bloom, who we've quoted before. You'll see that he's going to quote another source. You'll see soon why I quoted him. He's going to quote something from the Zohar, the Kabbalistic work, the Zohar. I'm no student of the Zohar, and I don't have access to it, so we're just going to see what he quoted here. He says, "Kechume etchem truma." The pasuk says that we're supposed to collect truma. We're supposed to collect from Hashem. For Hashem. We're supposed to collect all these goods. So he says as follows. Truma, the Zohar HaKadosh in the holy work, the Zohar, that mystical midrash, Darash Meitchem. When the pasuk says Kechu Meitchem, it has to be taken from you. Limeute Gezel. That means it's coming to exclude theft. Nothing that we're giving can be belonging to someone else that was ill-gotten gains. Every component that was going to be used for the construction of the Mishkan had to have come from the owner of that item. Nothing was going to be used that was of any kind of dubious origins. One of our great commentaries in the back of the Gemara is the Maharsha, that stands for Morenu Rav Shlomo Idolus, and he was living in the 1600s in Poland. So in the back of the Gemara on Ksuvos, when he has his commentary, he says, Al Ksuvos Shekasav B'emtza Devar, he writes in the middle, Zelashono, V'rabim B'dor Hazeh, many people in my generation, he's writing this in Poland in the 1600s, or Shemekabtzin Osher Shalahem, they have amassed their wealth, Shalo Be'emuna, and it wasn't with honesty. Because I've seen many people in my generation who have made their fortunes, and it wasn't an honest living. They somehow had deceived others. Uvichil Hashem, they had desecrated God's name in the process. For example, they had helped themselves to belongings of non-Jews that they may have taken advantage in their business dealings with someone who wasn't Jewish. And then what did I see them do? They donated those funds. Lios lam kavod b'chol hashana. That's what, whenever throughout the year, whenever there would be an appeal in shul, or let's say they would be selling different honorifics, they would use those funds to pay for that. If they got called up for an aliyah and they wanted to make a mishaberach, where did those funds come from that they donated to the shul or to the Jewish cause? They came from ill-gotten gains. Lios lem shem v'tiferes, because they thought through this they were going to establish for themselves some kind of long-lasting good name for themselves. Ve'ein zel a mitzvah ba'avera. He says, I'm telling you now, they think they're doing a mitzvah, but it's not a mitzvah. This is a mitzvah haba be'avera. This is a mitzvah that only came about by a transgression. Ve'ein la'osher hazeh melach v'kiyum. And this type of wealth that has been amassed through deception, through thievery, or through dishonesty, it will not last. It's not destined to last. The Maharsha says, he goes, I've seen this happen. I've seen it play itself out. People are thinking in the short run, okay, I found a way to work the system here, do something there, and they think they've just profited, and they think that they've made a name for themselves, and they're going to use this, and they're going to be wealthy. He goes, I'm telling you, that does not last. It cannot be something which is built on deception, built on fraud, that's built on dishonesty. It will not last. And whatever riches they think they have, they're going to see it disappear. That's what he writes over there. Now he tells you, he ends by saying, I am Asha Kasum Arenu Rabbeinu Agon Rav Avram Yaakov Pam. He goes, I also think it's worth it, one where I'm this theme, to see about how careful we have to be about looking at ill-gotten, about trying to make our livings from ill-gotten gains. If you really want to see someone who wrote something nicely about this, look at what Rav Pam was Rabbi Matis Blum's Rebbe, he was his teacher, and he was the head of the yeshiva Torah V'das in Brooklyn for many years. So he says, if you want to see a good essay he wrote about this, look it up in Choberes in a journal called HaMesifta. Mesifta Torah V'das every year, I don't know if they're still doing this, but for many, many years, every year they would put out a compendium, they would put out a journal, and he says, look in the article that Rabbi Pam wrote in Mesifta Shnas Tavshin Dal Mem 1984, and he goes, tells you what pages, and he says, I'll tell you that you'll see this. So I looked it up online. I had access to it online, and here it is. I found it. It was in a larger article that Rav Pam wrote, where he's talking about the prohibitions that are involved in involving Geneva, involving theft, even if it's just in the course of a sport, in the course of games. So he's probably talking about people sitting down and gambling together for sport, how this runs into some serious prohibitions. At the end of that article, he says he's got a little appendix on Tos Akam, people who think that they're going to try and make gains and they're going to try to make a living out of deceiving non-Jews. They're going to say, okay, I got to be really upright and honest to my family, to my extended family, but to outsiders. And they could justify this by saying, oh, we've been mistreated by the world for so long, so now it's okay to come up and deceive them. So he's got an appendix here just about how rotten this is and how we've got to get this out of our mindset. And he quotes a number of good sources. That's why Rabbi Bloom is telling us to go here. I see he's got an excellent source from the Rambam in his Mishnah Torah, which we're going to see quoted soon. I see that he's got something from the Rambam's commentary to Mishnah. He's got something here from Sefer Hasidim. He's got something, a very important source that I was familiar with from the Smag, the Sefer Mitzvah Sagadol. And he's got something here from the Mordechai and then the Ramah. Excellent stuff. But what I want to share with you is something that I'm sure Rabbi Pam knew about. He was a genius. I'm sure he knew about this source, but I want to share with you a different source on this topic. And this is one that I saw years ago, and it really, really resonated with me. So but before I share that with you, I want to give you a little bit about a biography about who this was. This is from a commentary you'll find in your standard edition of the Shulchan Aruch. It's called the Be'er Hagola. The Be'er Hagola, this is a commentary you'll find in the Shulchan Aruch. Normally, the Be'er Hagola just tells you sources. Like he'll say, okay, the Shulchan Aruch was telling us this halacha, this aspect of Jewish law. Where did he get this from? And what other sources discuss this? That's usually what the Be'er Hagola does. But sometimes the Be'er Hagola launches into an incredible piece, which I'm going to share with you because this is very personal and it's historical. But in order to fully appreciate it, we have to understand who was the author of the Be'er Hagola, and that's what we'll see on the bottom of page 1. The Be'er Hagola was written by Rabbi Moshe Rivkis. Now, you have to remember, he lived in the 1500s into the 1600s, and in the 1600s, it was very uncommon. Jews didn't really have last names. They didn't have surnames in Europe. It was uncommon. That's more of the modern age when the Western Europe was more developing, and then Jews from Eastern Europe are coming over and trying to get into the modern age. The government's demand that everyone has to have a surname. But that's a very recent development in the Jewish world. Many surnames, as you'll soon see here with Rabbi Moshe Rivkis, is actually a play on his mother's name. What do you think Rabbi Moshe Rivkis' mother's name was? Rivka. So they would refer to her kids as those are Rivka's boys. Those are Rivka's kids. So that becomes his surname, Rivka. Sometimes you'll see it spelled as Rivkash. But the original name was a Yiddish nickname. It was Rivka's boys. This is also there's many. We quoted earlier the Marsha. The Marsha's name was Shlomo Idolus. What do you think the last name Idolus? Idol. Everyone's ever heard of a Yiddish name Idol or Adol? That was his mother or mother-in-law. That was Idol's boy or Idol's son-in-law. That was one. And oftentimes those names were given to like the strong matriarch and sometimes with patriarchal family. Everyone heard of the famous Yiddish writer Isaac Bashevis Singer? Where do you think that middle name Bashevis is from? Bashevis. If it wasn't him, it was an ancestor. Before they had surnames, the matriarch, strong matriarch of that family was Batsheva. So her kids, her family, that's Bathsheva's family. Very often in Ashkenazic Jewry, that's how that occurred. And there's multiple examples like this. I'll give you one theory, by the way, about our family's last name of males. The theory that's out there is my brother had spent a lot of time researching this. The name in Europe, in the matzevas that are left, on the tombstones that are left, it's spelled like it says Milas. That seems out. Males seems to be the American pronunciation when they came over and they had to Americanize it. So males, it becomes males. But back in Europe, on the tombstones that are left in Poland, it looks like it says Milas. And what's the theory? There was a woman's Yiddish nickname in Poland for Malka. Has anyone ever met a girl from a Polish Yiddish background whose name was Mala? Malia or Mala? So I've met girls once or twice whose name was Mala. And when I saw that, I was like so excited. That's what my brother found, is that it seems like in parts of Poland, there was a Yiddish nickname for Malka that was Mala, that they call her. So we think the theory is there was some strong matriarch in our family way back when, whose name was Malka, Yiddish, Polish nickname was Mala, and her family, those are Mala's boys. And that would explain Mala's family. Why that explain why that surname Mala's kicked in. We don't know. That's the best theory we have. Anyhow, here's someone who we definitely know was the case. Rabbi Moshe Rivkis was born in Prague and settled early in life in Vilna, Lithuania. His father, Rav Naftali Hirsch Sofer of Vilna, was a scribe and a great Torah scholar. His mother, Rivka, took upon herself the financial support of the family so her husband could devote himself to his studies, as a result of which the surname Rivka's was appended to her son's name in deference to her. And again, as we saw in many parts of European Jewry, that was pretty common. In 1655, when the Cossack hordes descended upon Vilna, again, you have to remember 1648, 49, that Tach V'Tat era, there was this incredible upheaval. It began in the Ukraine, and it spreads to many other parts of Eastern Europe as well. Jewish communities that had stood for many years, some of them over 1,000 years, were absolutely decimated in that Cossack rebellion. The leader, I can never pronounce his name right. It was something like Chmelnytsky. Thank you, Shelly. I can never pronounce it properly. Thank you so much. So Chmelnytsky, that was his name. It starts 1648-49, but that was the big brunt of it in the Ukraine and further east. But it finds its way, the Cossacks find their way into Vilna in 1655, a couple years later, and that's where Rav Moshe Rivkis was living. When the Cossacks descended on Vilna and committed widespread massacres, Rabbi Moshe was forced to flee the city along with Rabbi Shabtai Cohen. He was also a very famous resident of Vilna at that time. He wrote the commentary called the Shach. That's another massive commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. Rabbi Ephraim HaKohen, who was an author of Shar Ephraim, another important halachic work. And Rabbi Aaron Shmuel Kaidonover. Again, this one's much less known, but he was a great genius. They eventually found refuge in Amsterdam. So imagine that. They're fleeing from Vilna. They eventually make it to Amsterdam. And when he gets to Amsterdam, that's where Rav Moshe published his great work on the Shulchan Aruch called Ber HaGola. It indicates the various sources for halachic decisions of the Mechaber and Ramah, along with brief comments by the author. Although he was accorded great respect in Amsterdam, Rav Moshe yearned to return to Vilna, his hometown. He succeeded in doing so before his death. The Vilna Gaon was a descendant of Rav Moshe, and often cites him in his Biragra, his commentary to Shulchan Aruch. So this is a little bit of a background. You'll see why that's important. Because if there's anyone in this world who could have been bitter and would have been entitled to be bitter about the miserable way the Jewish community was treated by their non-Jewish neighbors, it would have been this Rav Moshe Rivkis. As you saw in there, he saw Vilna massacred. He had to flee with his family. He lost everything. All he had with him was his manuscripts, and that's how he was able to print this Ber HaGola in Amsterdam. But if there's someone out there who could have been bitter and said, you know what, after what they've done to us, after what those non-Jewish hordes out there, how the rough treatment that we've gotten, we're entitled to make a living any way possible, even if it involves cheating and deception. If there's anyone who could have come up with such a rationalization, it would have been this Rav Moshe Rivkas. But I want to share with you what he writes. This is in his commentary, the Be'er HaGola, on page 2. And what you'll see in this commentary, what just really shocked me, is that it's so unusual. Again, usually what goes on in Be'er HaGola is he'll bring down sources. Where did the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, what were they basing their ruling on? And sometimes, excuse me, he'll offer a very, very brief comment. Here, I want to share with you something that he did that's much longer. So we're looking here, I just have the whole column. We're looking in the second column as hey. Now, just to understand where this is in the section of Shulchan Aruch called Kosher Mishpat, having to do with monetary law, and he's actually in the section having to do with theft and deception. So he's here, and let's look at where he says hey. Hey is it's about, I'm going to say about 7, 8, 9 lines down. You see the hey? It's towards the beginning of the line. So it says, hey, the kakas of a Rambam. He starts by quoting the Rambam. What Rambam writes in his Mishnah Torah. Perak Yud Aleph and Hilchos Gezela, Din Daled, Shahaya Kave Daso, Umuteres Ubir Sham Ketzad, Kegon Shasa Akum Cheshbon. He says as follows. He's talking about how we're not allowed to steal from non-Jews. Don't think, okay, I just gotta be honorable with my family, extended family. But if I'm dealing with non-Jews who may have been treating us awful, I'm allowed to steal from them. Rambam says absolutely not. He says, and he gives an example. He says, let's say someone's involved in some kind of financial dealings with a non-Jew, and in the course of the non-Jew making their calculations, they made a mistake. The Jew needs to say to him, you see, I'm depending on your calculations. I think you made a mistake. And he writes there, halacha hey, pasak Rav Kahana, sham, the Abid Hakin, okay, a little further. He says there, Shem Hexer Aved Alakum, and he writes there that if someone returns a lost object, not only am I not allowed to steal from him, and I got to correct him if he makes a mistake, but if let's say he lost an object, I find this wallet in the street, I want to return it to him as well. Lakadosh is Hashem, and I'm doing that. Why am I returning it? Even though technically you might find something that says I don't have a mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, the mitzvah of returning a lost item might technically only apply to a family member, but if a person here returns it, in order to make a Kiddush Hashem, to sanctify God's name, Kadesh Yifaru as Yisrael, in order that the world at large will come to praise the Jewish people, what kind of an honorable, honest people we are. V'yedu shehem bali amuna, they'll know that we're trustful. Hareza meshubach, that is incredibly praiseworthy. And that's his quote from the Rambam. Now look what he says now. Similarly, when it comes to returning a mistake, meaning let's say the non-Jew in the course of business calculations, made a mistake, gave us too much change. The Be'er HaGola says, I want to write something for all generations. I want to write this for posterity. The world should know this. I personally have seen Rabim Gadlu ve'ashiru. I have seen many Jews out there who had amassed great wealth, mintos, from mistakes, shehitu akum, that either the non-Jew could have made this mistake on their own, or the Jew could have played a role in helping them make that mistake. V'lo etzlichu. But despite those short-lived gains that those conniving people experienced, they did not succeed. V'yardu nechseim l'timayon, and they ended up losing all of their assets. And they did not leave anything for their heirs. They didn't leave any blessing behind for their family. Kamasha Kosov is Sefer Hasidim, and the Sefer Hasidim mentions this as well. That was one of the sources Rabbi Pam quoted. He tells you where to find that. Rabbi Masher Kidshu, he goes, but on the contrast, I also saw Rabbi Masher Kidshu Hashem. I saw many people who specifically went out of their way to sanctify God's name. V'echziru toyos akum, and they went out of their way to return when someone made a mistake and made an error. B'davar chashuv, even if it was a great amount. Gadlu v'ashiru. I saw those people, even though in the short run it looks like they're giving away a potential gain, I saw those people become successful. V'etzlichu, and they became wealthy, and they were able to leave sizable amounts of inheritance for their children. So here's the Ber Agola, who's lived such a life of turmoil, has been terribly mistreated by the world around him, and yet here he is cautioning the Jewish people, be honest, be upright, don't take advantage of anybody that's out there. They could be illiterate, they could be whatever, they don't know how to make their calculations right. Don't take advantage, certainly don't cause them to make mistakes. And I'm telling you what I myself have witnessed, that I've seen many people who amassed great wealth because of such conniving behavior. They lost it all. They didn't, God just had a way of making sure nothing remained. But yet, the ones who went out of their way to make a Kiddush Hashem, the ones who went out of their way to be honest and upright and make certain that everyone who dealt with a Jew would walk away from that experience saying, that is the epitome of an honest person, that when they look in a dictionary and they see the verb in there, slang Jew, it's not going to mean to whittle down and to cheat, but it means to honestly deal with someone who's upright and filled with integrity. People who went out of their way to do that, I saw those people end up in the long run that they were extremely successful. God bless them. And that's something that this Ber Agola is leaving behind for posterity. I recently pulled this out. The reason we're bringing this here is because we started with Rav Matis Bloom, who said, he quoted a Zohar on when it said that the truma, the gifts being brought for the Mishkan, have to be me'alechem, have to be from you. They can't be from Gezel. They can't be from theft. And then we saw Rav Bloom quote Rav Pam, quoting sources about how important, he quoted Amar Shah, how important it is that nothing that we do, donations, we can't be involved with theft. Our hands need to be clean. This Ber Agola is very, very important to know. This came up recently as well. A nephew of mine reached out to me a couple of weeks ago. It was a Friday. I remember exactly where I was. I was going into the bank, and he reached out to me, and he says, Uncle Akiva, I have a question. I said, sure. He says, I ordered something on Amazon, and it hadn't arrived. So I finally got through. It's very hard to actually speak to someone when you have an Amazon problem, right? It's always on the website, but finally he got to speak to someone, and he complained and told them that the item never arrived, and they said, okay, we feel terrible about this. We're going to credit your account. So he feels good. Okay, I got my money back. 5 minutes later, what happened? UPS pulls up in front of his dorm, of his yeshiva, and wouldn't you know it, they apologized. They said, this box was lost at our warehouse. We have your Amazon package. So he's asking me, he says, what do I do now? So I said, what's your question? He says, do I have to get back in touch with Amazon? Or listen, they refunded me. So I told him, Moish, I'm going to share with you this Ber Agola. I want you to look it up. I'm going to tell you where to find it. And I'm telling you, this is what you got to do. You got to email them back, put the ball in their court, either email, call, whatever you do, put the ball in their court, but throw in this detail. Tell them, as a Bible observing Jew, I want to be absolutely honest. In other words, if you're already going to be honest, make sure that they know that, who's behind this, make sure that they know that this is a Bible observing Jew. Whatever their policy, they'll make a decision, but you've got to reach out to them and put the ball in their court and let them know that, you guys just issued me a refund, but the package did end up arriving. And as a Bible observing Jew, I want to be absolutely honest, because that's what's expected of me. That's what our Torah wants of us. And I want to let you know about this. I didn't follow up with him to see what happened. Did Amazon end up refunding? This happened to me, by the way, a while ago. It wasn't a big, I asked him, I said, how great was the refund? He said it was about $200. So I said, look, I understand you got a Yetzer Hara, you got a real, that's a sizable amount that, you're thinking, you want to keep that $200. But I said, again, this Ber Agola is saying what he saw with his own eyes. And remember what he lived through and what he experienced. No rationalizations pushed him over the edge. And he was telling people, he's seen plenty of people that in the short run, it looks like they're profiting, they're making a gain, they lost everything. The ones that he saw come out ahead at the end were the ones who were very honest. So that's what I told him.
The interesting thing is sometimes Amazon will say keep it, and sometimes they certainly something $200.
Exactly. I had an experience once.
So my question is, when they say keep it,
you did your part. They're there. Whoever that customer service, whatever rank they were, they're given the authority to make those decisions. But you went on record, you're putting it out there for them that, guys, I want to correct you. I had an experience once with Amazon. I had ordered, I will do this sometimes before Yom Tov, because let's say you can have a 2 or 3 day Yom Tov, and I want to have a candle that's burning, so I'll be able, the next night, Layla will be able to light candles and stuff. So what I'll do is I'll usually buy those scented candle jars that because those things will burn for good 3 days and they'll smell good. And I'll usually put them in my garage in a bucket so the breeze won't get to them. It'll make my garage smell nice too. So so I get these. So I usually get them at Michael's. Every now and then I'm in Michael's. They go on sale, and they're usually they'll go on sale for either 3 for $10 or 4 for $10 because they're normally like $6.99 if you go to Kroger or something like that. But Michael's, they'll always after a season, after the fall season, after whatever season, they're always on sale there. And sometimes one time I noticed them on Amazon. There was a great sale, so I must have ordered like 4 of them on Amazon. And whoever the bozo was who packed them didn't package them all. They just took 4 glass jars, candles, put them in a box, and sent them to me. So what do you think happens? It gets to me, and of the 4 of them, I was surprised even one of them survived. 3 of them were cracked, one was fine. So I get through to Amazon and I tell them, I ordered 4, 3 of them were cracked, and they gave me a refund on all 4 of them. So I put my money where my mouth is. I got in touch. I finally got through to someone, and I said, I want to tell you, you had me fill out on the website which item. This was an order of 4, but I only 3 of them cracked. You refunded me 4. You should have only refunded me for 3. And she told me, the lady I was speaking to, she says, thank you for your honesty, but we have absolutely no mechanism in the system to do what you're asking us to do. It's either we have to, our mechanism is set up that we have to refund your total order. We can't, there's no such thing as refunding, partial order. So you refund a total order and then we'll send you a new 4 or something like that. So I said, but again, this went back and forth. She thought I was crazy. And then finally I said, okay, if that's all you can do, thank you very much. And that's what she did. But I put the ball in their court. By the way, when they sent me the next one, a good couple of them broke again. They didn't. I stick to Michael's now. I don't order that on. Yeah, lesson learned. Okay, so those are the first Divrei Torah that I wanted to share with you. Now I want to share with you something very different. We're going to go to page 3. So that was a lesson in honesty. God willing, we'll be honest. Honesty is the best policy. Now I want to share with you something that I think this can be a great lesson, specifically when we're going through difficult times in life, whether it's personally, it can be on a local level, it could be on a communal level, it could be on a national level, it could be on a level of all of Am Yisrael going through a difficult time. I think this is a beautiful Divrei Torah, and I want to share with you. And I want to give credit where credit's due. I have a brother-in-law who works at a yeshiva in Far Rockaway called Divrei Torah. It's a very, very large boys' school. I think it starts at kindergarten. They go through a base medrash, and even I think they have a small kollel there. And I don't know if it's 1,500 students there. It's a very, very large place. They always seem to be involved in some kind of building expansion projects. It's like it's yeah, but it's fascinating. So the rabbi who's the head of it, his name is Rabbi Yaakov Bender, and my brother-in-law was there a couple of years ago. He sent me. I guess he had come out. This is volume 2, so there must have been a volume 1 that it was on Chumash, just some of his thoughts and that he had shared in the yeshiva on Chumash. So I was looking at it this week on Parshas Pekudei, and I saw the most beautiful idea. He quotes this Rav Meir Shapiro. Again, he didn't give a source for it. Again, Rabbi Meir Shapiro died very young. Here's a brief bio of him. He only lived from 1887 to 1933, which is very impressive how much he accomplished. He died before being 50 years old. And he was a prominent Polish Hasidic rabbi and Rosh Yeshiva, also known as the Lubliner Rav, because he lived in Lublin, Poland. He is noted for his promotion of the Daf Yomi study program in 1923 and establishing this great yeshiva, Yeshiva Chachmei Lublin, in 1930. And again, he died just 3 years later, in 1933. Fascinating about him too. Look at this last detail. During the years of 22 to 27, Shapiro was the first Orthodox Jew to become a member of the, I don't know how to pronounce that word in Polish. How do you pronounce that, Shelley? Sim? Sim. Oh, thank you. Okay, that's how you say the parliament of the Second Polish Republic. So he was representing the Jews. So here he was. This rabbi was a member of parliament. That's absolutely fascinating. Biography at home. You do. So it's fascinating. He didn't even live to 50 years old. This man was an absolute Gaon. He knew all of Torah, and what he accomplished is absolutely incredible. So anyhow, Rabbi Bender quotes a famous Devar Torah of his. However, I said I have to see this inside. So I looked on one of the internet database of Jewish books that I have, and I found it in 2 places. They quote it in his name. Again, he didn't have a chance to print his own Sfarim because he died very young, but many of his students printed up some of his Divrei Torah. So here I found 2 different Sfarim that quote him. It must have been, again, tradition. This must have been a saying of his that he used. Now let's see the 2 places. This week we're not going to have it, but the Haftorah that's normally laned when Parshas Pekudei is read, if you look in a Chumash, will be from Melachim Aleph, from the first book of Kings. It's not going to be this week because this week is a special Haftorah Shabbos. It's Parshas Chodesh. So it's going to be a different Haftorah that's going to be read this week. So it's not the normal Haftorah for Pekudei. But the normal Haftorah for Pekudei, remember, Haftorahs are always modeled after the Parsha. So if Pekudei was about the completion of the Mishkan, the Haftorahs from the first book of Kings about the completion of the first Beis Hamikdash that was built by Shlomo HaMelech. So here's what it says. It says in there, let's see, 3 psukim. Yud, Vayibet says HaKohanim min HaKodesh. It came to pass that when the Kohanim, and this is in the inauguration ceremonies for the first Beis Hamikdash built by Shlomo, when the Kohanim left the Kodesh section, the holy section of the Beis Hamikdash, V'ha'anan malei es Beis Hashem, and this heavenly cloud descended and completely filled. It was like, imagine, it's like pea soup fog in the Beis Hamikdash, because God's presence was so evident there. Yud Aleph, v'lo yachlu hakohanim la'amod l'shareis mipnei onan. It wasn't just, it was so thick, they were almost like forced out. They were pushed out of the Beis Hamikdash because of this thick pea soup fog. Ki molei kvod Hashem es Beis Hashem, because God's presence was totally filling the house of God. Yud Beis, Az Amar Shlomo, upon witnessing this, how God's presence had come to dwell amidst the Jewish peoples so intensely, so Shlomo declares, Hashem Amar, the Lord said, Lishkon Ba'arafel, that he would dwell amidst us in the thick darkness, that God is going to dwell Ba'arafel. Arafel doesn't just mean in a cloud, Arafel is thick darkness. So let's see what some students of Rav Meir Shapiro say he said on this. So this is in one of the Sfarim I found online. So he quotes the pasuk and he says as follows: B'tzeis HaKohanim, he says, Miyad b'chanukas Beis Hamikdash. Immediately when the first Beis Hamikdash was inaugurated, Hirgish Kvar Shlomo HaMelech al Vashalom. Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, immediately understood. He understood the symbolism that there was this dark, thick cloud that descended. So Shlomo understood Sheyavo Zman, that God was sending a hint that there will come a time for the Jewish people, B'tzeis HaKohanim min HaKodesh. There will come a time where the Kohanim are going to leave the Kodesh. What does that allude to? Hamikdash Yisaref. There will come a time where the Beis Hamikdash in all its glory we see it now, there will come a time that it will be destroyed. Ve'anan ha'ashan, and the cloud of that burning cloud, Yimaleas Beis Hashem, there's going to be a fire destroying the Beis Hamikdash. This was a symbolism saying there will be a day that this is all going to be destroyed. So at the inauguration, Shlomo HaMelech has this divine flash of inspiration by witnessing this thick cloud. So what does Shlomo do? Shlomo says, there's a silver lining in this cloud. How? Hisnachem bazeh. He found the following words to offer consolation to Bnei Yisrael. He says, Va'amar. He says, the message we're being sent right now by this dark cloud is that this is not going to last. This is going to get destroyed. So Shlomo says, I have a way to share words of consolation. What does this symbolize? Hashem Amar Lishkon Ba'arafel. God said that he will always dwell in the dark thickness, meaning Gam Ba'arafel, even when
alerts are expected in a few minutes.
Okay, even when if you could mute yourself, please. So he says,
that we have to leave.
Okay, we'll see you. All right. So it says if even in the darkness, even in the dark cloud, even when it's so dark, still, Shochen Kvod Hashem, God's presence still is with us. Hashomer al Am Yisrael v'al Kiyumo, and God will always look after the Jewish people. If you want to mute it, okay?
I should have been on the.
So it says that God will always be with us. God will always be with us. And he will dwell with us, and he will not abandon us. He will make sure that we remain intact. So he says that was the message that Shlomo HaMelech wanted to share with Bnei Yisrael. So he's saying, even in the darkest times, we should never think that God has departed. We should never think he's no longer with us. His presence remains with us absolutely constantly. That was what Rav Meir Shapiro wanted to share. And we'll share one more place where he says the same idea. I found it in another place in the Torah. It says in Vayikra and Acharei Mos, when he's talking about the service that would occur in the Beis Hamikdash on Yom Yom Kippur. It says, "Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe achrei Moshe shnei bnei Aaron b'karvasom ifnei Hashem v'yimusu vayomer Hashem al Moshe daber al Aaron achicha." God says, "Speak to your brother Aaron. Va'al yavo b'chol eis al hakodesh mibeis laparoches." Don't come just anytime you want from in the Kodesh section, beyond the parochas, beyond the curtain, meaning where the Aron is, to the Holy of Holies. Don't think you can just come whenever you want. El Pnei HaKaporos, Asher al Aron, to come to where the ark is. V'lo yamus, because I don't want you to die. Meaning, there's only one day a year that you're allowed in there, and that's Yom Kippur. Ki be'anon eira'eh al HaKaporos. For I appear over the ark in a cloud. So we explain that to mean the only time the Kohen Gadol is allowed in the Kodesh HaKodashim is when he can produce a cloud of Ketores, special Ketores in there. The rest of the year, Ketores is burned in the Kodesh, in the holy section, not in the Holy of Holies. One day of the year, the Kohen comes in with a special ceremony, puts the fire coals in the fire pan down on the floor, and then puts the incense, the special spices down on top of them, producing a cloud. That's on Yom Kippur. That's how we understand that pasuk, saying there's only one day a year the Kohen Gadol should be in the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur when there's a cloud. So he says here too, Rav Meir Shapiro would share the same message. Ki be'anon era'eh, for I appear in a cloud. Amar Agon Rav Meir Shapiro milublin shekan rimza lanu Torah. Here again, the Torah is giving us the following hint: she'al yisya'esh adam biroso. A person should never give up hope and should never feel abandoned when he feels sheparanos ba'alav, that they're being hit with punishments and that the Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people, are in a low point. V'choshech yichaseh aretz, and darkness has enveloped the land. Afilu be'esh shenira shehine afsa kol tikva, even at the times where a person might think that all hope is lost. Ki afilu ba'anan, even when there's such a thick cloud, eis shakol lot barafel, even a time where everyone is just lost in darkness. Kanan, and it's like a thick cloud that's engulfed everything. In kol zeh era'eh. Even with all that, God says, "Era'eh, I shall be seen ba'ashras hashchina, with my divine presence." Meaning, God is never going to abandon us. There are times where it looks like all is lost. There's times where it looks dark in the history and the annals of the Jewish people, but God is still with us, and He's with us on this journey. That's how Rabbi Meir Shapiro wanted to explain in at least two different places. I saw quoted from his students on this, and that's what Rabbi Bender was bringing down here in this book. That it's a big drush on this, and there's a strong lessons in this. The lesson of this is that it's so difficult to know what God's plans are. It's impossible. It's so hard for us. We're not able to. We're mortals. HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Yeshayahu Navi. He told Isaiah, he says, "Kilo machshavosai machshavosechem." My thoughts are not your thoughts. You're mortal. You can't possibly understand. My way of playing chess is a whole different level than what you mortals play. You can't know what I'm doing. Ki gavu shamayim aretz, the distance that separates heaven and earth. Ken gavu machshavosai machshavosechem. That's the distance between man's thoughts and my thoughts. We can't comprehend the way God's operating this world. And there are times where it just looks so dark. It looks so lost. It looks like there's chaos. But to have this hope, to have this idea that this is all somehow or another part of God's plan, one day it'll all make sense. Maybe in retrospect, maybe it'll take years. Maybe it'll take much longer than that. But somehow or another, to have that trust in God, that everything we're experiencing is part of His plan, and this fits into His big plan and all this. He brings down just an amazing story in this book. I didn't put it on the sheets, but I just have to share this with you. He says this happened to his great aunt. So this would mean his mother's aunt. And he says his mother's aunt was living in Tsarist Russia. The mother's aunt was Aunt Leah. So this is his mother's aunt. So Rabbi Bender's mother was a survivor. She made it to America. She founded one of the first Beis Yaakovs in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and she was a student of Sarah Schneer, I believe, as well. And so her aunt Leah, she was living in Tsarist Russia in a town called, I don't know how to pronounce this, Stebest or Stipest. I don't know how to pronounce it. And it says as follows. It says that her father was one of the Gevirim. He was one of the wealthy Jews in that area. area, and he owned several businesses over there. When this Aunt Leah, his great Aunt Leah, was a little girl, just about 12 years old, she was once outside of the village, and she heard loud cries at the side of the road, and she saw that there was this young peasant who was sitting in a field weeping. So she went over, she's this good-hearted girl, 12-year-old, she sees this little peasant boy, and he's crying his heart out. So she just says, little boy, I feel so bad. What's the matter? Is there anything I can help with? What's the matter? And this little boy confides in her. The little boy says that he's loves reading. He thinks that he can make it something of himself with education, but his parents are absolute uneducated, unlettered, illiterate peasants, and he has the opportunity to go off to some boarding school, and his parents won't hear of it. They say, for generations, we've been illiterate peasants just picking potatoes. That's where you're going to be. Don't think you're better than any of us. And they're dashing his dreams. And there's this opportunity that's there, and it seems like he had even applied and won a scholarship, but he doesn't even have the wagon fare to make it there. And that's why he's crying his heart out, because he knows he could be more, and his parents are intent on keeping him as a dumb, illiterate peasant. So he's crying his heart out. So this Leah feels so bad for him. She goes home and tells her father, and the father probably does a little homework, finds that it's legit, and gives her an envelope with some cash to give this to the boy, that this could be his money to get his wagon to whatever this boarding school is, to have a shot at a future. And the kid does this. And they never hear from him again. Now, my question on this story is, I can't believe he wasn't scared about doing that. This peasant kid's parents, if they would find out that it was, this Jewish family who gave their kid the money to be able to go off, they'd have his heads. Okay, it happens. Okay, I don't know why they felt it was okay. They did this. Years later, this is during the time of Tsarist Russia. We spoke about this, I think, a couple months ago, about the terrible decrees that were living during the time of one of the final czars, and this was called the Cantonist decrees, where they were recruiting kids, specifically Jewish kids, for 25 years of service in the Tsar's army, and this was seen as a way to basically force them away from their Jewish traditions and make them really assimilate into broader Russia. And it was a very, very difficult time for the Jewish community. So what he says as follows: how did this story play itself out? Is that the Tsar's officers arrive at this Jewish town Friday afternoon before Shabbos, and they basically say, we've got a mandate from the local, whoever is in charge here, that we need X amount of kids from this town, and we're going to give you till Motzei Shabbos to figure out who are the kids that are coming. We have our wagons here, we're hauling them off for the Tsar's army. And the town is crying. Everyone is, oh my God, like, what are we going to do? No, there's no escape. They've got the town surrounded. There's no escape. They've got till Motzei Shabbos to figure this out. So this Leah, at this point, she's much older. She's not a 12-year-old girl anymore, and she's married to a very influential person in town. They basically tell her, you've got to ask Rav Yitzchak Elchanan Spector. He was the great rabbi. He ends up becoming the great leader of Kovna later, but at this point, he was still the town rabbi at the next town over. And they tell her, you've got to ask Rav Yitzchak Elchanan Spector what to do. Because of your connections, you can get out of town and ask. They go, what do you mean? It's Shabbos. They go, it doesn't matter. This is a matter of life and death. You have to get to Rav Yitzchak Elchanan, and she does. She gets to Rav Yitzchak Elchanan, and he tells her, not only are you allowed to travel on Shabbos to the local governor, but you're chayiv, you're obligated to do so. Put on your best clothes, get your best wagon, and go visit the local governor at Shabbos. It doesn't matter. It's a mitzvah. You have to do this to save the kids. Whatever you could do. She says, what am I going to say? Whatever, got to try something to do our part. God might put the right words in your mouth. You got to get to the governor's, and you got to plead the case. So she does this on Shabbos, and she gets there, and she pulls up. The guards ask, who are you? But they see it's an important looking carriage. She's well dressed. They assume she's got an appointment, and she goes in, and this governor, sure enough, who is the governor at this point? It was that little boy who had been sent away, and he immediately hears what's going on, writes up a thing that this town is exempt from the Tsar's draft, and he gives it to her. She gets back Motzei Shabbos. She gets there as everyone's crying, saying goodbye to their kids, packing them up with their tefillin and packing them up with their cookies and snacks, whatever, and begging them to never forget they're Jewish. She gets there just in the nick of time, hands off this letter, and that's the way. So he says he has this story from his mother, who heard it from her Aunt Leah, that this whole thing played itself out. And so he brings brings down this whole story, and that's what he says here. Decades later, when there was a cloud around the Hashkacha, meaning like there was a cloud, this whole town was in the biggest throes of despair. It became clear that this had been a Chesed Hashem, the divine Yeshua, for a problem that had not yet arisen. We know nothing of his plans, but we try to remember there are moments of clarity, moments of darkness, and even when we don't feel it, he's watching out for us. On that dark Shabbos in Steeps, the people might have felt like they were alone, but 40 years earlier, the Ribono Shalom had already taken care of the problem. Whether he makes himself shown or not, he is there. This is what Shlomo HaMelech perceived. So that's it. Hashem has chosen to dwell sometimes in a thick cloud, but it's but a cover. That's what he's saying there. I think that's something good to remember, that there are times we all feel this. There are times where it's just so blatantly obvious that God's with us. We just got done reading Megillas Esther, and then there's times where we're just wondering. Like there have been times in Jewish history where we just don't see it. And just to remember this, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's what he says. That's what Shlomo HaMelech said. HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us this is the way it's going to be. There are going to be times in Jewish history where there's Arafel, there's dark clouds, but still, Amar Hashem Amar Lishkon Barafel. God will still dwell in that Arafel. He'll still be with us even during those very, very difficult times. I think it's a great message for us all there. All right, you got it. Have a good day. I'm sorry the technology didn't cooperate as it usually does.
Your parents
Yeah.
got the warning. I got the warning on my phone. That's why they were telling you they had to go.
Oh, is that what that was?